Here is something that almost nobody talks about honestly when the subject of money comes up. When people feel financial stress, the instinct most of us expect to kick in is restraint. We expect that someone who is struggling with money will naturally pull back, spend less, save more, and make careful and rational decisions until the situation improves. That is the logical response. That is the response we believe we would have. And that is almost never what actually happens in real life when the pressure becomes intense enough to feel truly overwhelming. The reality of how human beings respond to serious money stress is almost the exact opposite of what logic would predict. And understanding this pattern is one of the most important things you can learn about the psychology of personal finance and your own financial behavior under pressure. When financial stress reaches a certain threshold, something shifts in the brain that researchers have studied extensively and that therapists who work with money issues encounter. In almost every client they see, the stress itself becomes so uncomfortable, so relentless, and so difficult to sit with that the mind begins searching desperately for any form of relief that is immediately available. And spending money, even money you do not have, provides that relief in a way that is instant, reliable, and chemically real inside your nervous system. A purchase releases dopamine. It creates a brief but genuine sensation of control in a situation where everything else feels out of control. It generates a moment of pleasure in the middle of a prolonged experience of anxiety and dread. The brain does not distinguish between healthy relief and harmful relief in that moment. It simply moves toward whatever makes the pain stop, even temporarily, even at a cost that makes the underlying situation worse over time. This is why people in serious debt buy things they cannot afford. It is why someone who just checked their bank balance and felt sick about what they saw end up spending money on something completely unnecessary within hours of that moment. It is why financial stress so reliably produces more financial stress rather than the corrective behavior that logic would suggest should follow automatically. Researchers call this phenomenon stress spending, and it operates on a mechanism that has nothing to do with intelligence, discipline, or character. It is a neurological response to an emotional condition, and it affects people at every income level and every education level with remarkable consistency. The executive under pressure makes the same impulsive purchase as the person living paycheck to paycheck. The amounts are different. The mechanism is identical. What makes this pattern so financially destructive is the compounding effect it creates over time. Each stress purchase provides brief relief and then adds to the underlying financial pressure that triggered the spending in the first place. More pressure generates more stress. More stress generates more spending. More spending generates more pressure. The cycle tightens with each rotation, and the people caught inside it very often cannot see clearly enough to identify what is actually happening because they are too deep inside the emotional experience to observe it from any distance. Breaking this cycle requires something that sounds simple and is genuinely difficult in practice. It requires creating a gap between the feeling of financial stress and the action of spending money. That gap does not have to be large. Research consistently shows that even a delay of 10 to 15 minutes between the impulse to spend and the act of spending is enough to allow the prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of your brain, to re-engage with the situation and evaluate whether the purchase actually serves your interests. The practical tools for creating that gap are straightforward. Remove saved payment information from the apps and websites where you tend to spend impulsively. Put a specific waiting period on any unplanned purchase above a threshold. You decide in advance when you are calm and thinking clearly. Write down what you are feeling before you buy something, because the act of naming the emotion reduces its intensity enough to create the space for a different choice. Tell someone you trust about what you are experiencing, because financial stress thrives in secrecy and loses some of its power when it is spoken out loud to another person. None of these interventions requires perfect willpower or extraordinary discipline. They simply require the design of small structural barriers that give your rational mind enough time to participate in decisions that your stressed emotional mind would otherwise make alone and badly. The most important insight is this: if you find yourself spending more when money is tight, you are not weak and you are not broken. You are experiencing a completely predictable neurological response to a genuinely painful situation. Recognizing that response for what it is, naming it clearly, and building systems around it rather than relying on willpower alone is the path out of the cycle. The stress does not have to stop before the spending stops. The spending can stop first, and the relief that follows from regaining financial control becomes its own form of stress reduction over time.